All right, so some of you may have heard this term and some of you may not have. It's called intimacy anorexia. And this was a term that was coined by Dr. Doug Weiss. He's a clinical psychologist based out of Colorado Springs in Colorado. And he's written the book on this. It's called Intimacy Anorexia, Healing the Hidden Addiction in Your Marriage. And what he found as a clinical psychologist is that over the years there was this pattern of behavior that he was seeing happen in a very large percentage of his clients. And when I got into practice, I noticed this pattern of behavior in probably about 80% of the men that I was talking to. And so what intimacy anorexia is, it's the active and intentional withholding of mental, emotional, spiritual, and sometimes physical intimacy from your partner. And there's basically 10 characteristics that Dr. Weiss identified. So the first characteristic is that this person will stay so busy that there's little time for their spouse. So they'll go to work all day, but when they come home, they'll keep themselves busy on the computer, or their smartphone, or they go to the garage, or they head off and do recreational activities and just keep themselves busy, and there's hardly any time for the spouse. The second characteristic is that when issues come up in the relationship, and it's obviously his issue, and then she points it out, he will defend himself and shift blame, which is a really common thing. The third thing is there's a withholding of love. The fourth thing is a withholding of praises and compliments. The next one is there's a withholding of sex. And sometimes, and even when there is sexual contact, it feels disconnected. It feels unrelational. So it feels kind of one-dimensional, where it's all just about the physical and there's no emotional and spiritual connection. The sixth thing is there's a limiting or withholding of spiritual connection. The next one that's really common is this person has the inability to express their feelings. They can't seem to identify or express their feelings. The next one is that he'll use anger or the silent treatment to try to get his own way. Another thing that happens is criticism, whether it's spoken or unspoken. And then the last one, though not as common, but it will show up, is there will be a controlling or shaming regarding money or spending. Most partners who live with somebody with intimacy anorexia will describe their relationship as roommates rather than a married couple. And it's just so frustrating because over the years it feels like you're getting sucked dry, that you're not being loved or cherished by the other person. There's basically 4 causes to intimacy anorexia that Dr. Doug Weiss identified. So the first cause is sexual abuse. If people get sexually abused, they'll automatically put up barriers to intimacy. The second cause is difficulties in attachment to the cross-gender parent. So if you're a man, that's your attachment to your mother. If you're a woman, that's your attachment with your father. If that attachment was dysfunctional in some way, then you won't know how to interact with members of the opposite sex. So later on, when you get into a relationship or into marriage, you won't know how to interact properly with your spouse. A third cause is modeling. So modeling, when you're growing up in a house, your parents are modeling for you what a marriage is supposed to look like. So if that marriage is cold and distant, or if it's abusive in some way, then guess what? You're going to take that same way of interacting into your own marriage relationship later on. And then the fourth cause of intimacy anorexia, and this is by far the most common cause, is sex addiction and porn addiction especially. Because what happens in porn addiction is that if you're masturbating to the fantasy world thousands of times in your life, you're going to end up reinforcing all the psychological benefits of the fantasy world onto your sexual arousal template. So for example, the fantasy world is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It can be controlled and manipulated and made to do whatever you want it to do. And it never says no. It always says yes. And the fantasy world has no emotional needs. So it doesn't take any work to have a relationship with the fantasy world. So now when you get into a real relationship with a real woman, she's nothing like that. She's not available 24/7. She can't be controlled and manipulated, made to do whatever you want her to do. And she has emotional needs, which means it takes work to have a relationship with a real woman. So what ends up happening is so many men will start to withdraw and withhold from their primary partner. And then they go exclusively to the fantasy world to have a relationship, which of course is a fake relationship, which will end up destroying your marriage and destroying your life, quite frankly. So I spend probably more time in my counseling sessions helping people overcome intimacy anorexia than any other problem. So if you really relate to what I'm saying here, then contact me. I not only provide counseling, but I also have a intimacy anorexia recovery group that you can join, so that information is on my website as well. Hope to hear from you soon so that you can break free from this insidious condition.